Coming up, who told Netanyahu to prepare Israel for Messiah? Where will the third temple be built? And what will happen to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Asqa Mosque? Will they be moved in peacetime, shattered by an earthquake? Or will it be shared sovereignty? We'll examine where the Jewish temple stood and what this means for the third Jewish temple in Jerusalem, Israel. The Rebbe was an international rock star of a rabbi with influence leading to the White House. And he became a spiritual advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu.
In 1984, when I was appointed Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, I visited the great rabbi of Lubavitch. But here's what the Rebbe said to me. You'll be serving in a house of many lies.
The Rebbe taught that the Jews could hasten the day of the Messiah, the Moshiach, the Anointed One, through obedience to God's will. And the Rebbe scorned the Jews for failing to prepare for the Moshiach, the Messiah, declaring the Jews resisted God's will. It was also the Rebbe who told Netanyahu that God had an important role for him. A politically shrewd move, and yet Netanyahu was inspired by the Rebbe. The Rebbe urged his followers to build the Mishkan, a place for God to dwell and tabernacle. And he spoke of the first and second Beit Hamidrash, the temple in Jerusalem, and the need for the third temple, and the immediacy of the call. It was widely reported that in a private meeting, whilst Netanyahu was still unknown, the Rebbe told him that he would be Israel's last prime minister who will pass the scepter to the Messiah. And when the Rebbe met Netanyahu, he reminded him of his duty to do something to hasten the coming of Messiah. Since these meetings, Netanyahu has become the most important person in the Middle East, and his choices reverberate in the White House and in the halls of political power around the world.
I met the Rebbe for the first time in 1984 when I came to the UN. Rebbe, I came to see you.
But times change, and in 1994 the Rebbe died. And as clashes over the Temple Mount took place, Netanyahu reaffirmed many times that there are no plans for a change of status on the Temple Mount.
Israel reaffirms its commitment to upholding unchanged the status quo on the Temple Mount, in word and in practice. As we have said many times, Israel has no intention to divide the Temple Mount, and we completely reject any attempt to suggest otherwise.
But politics is a game of chess, and the dream of a third temple lives on. In 1967, all of Jerusalem was restored under Jewish control for the first time since antiquity. So when Israel took full sovereignty over Jerusalem in 1967, this was seen as a profound prophetic significance, fulfilling the ancient prophecies of the Bible. Will the third temple be built? But as Israel was in a state of war for its very survival, there was no desire on behalf of politicians to consider rebuilding the Jewish temple. Immediately, sovereignty of the Temple Mount was handed to Jordan and to Jerusalem's Islamic Council. And some say that was a brilliant thing to do to bring peace. Others say that was a catastrophe because we've lost control of the most important place in the whole of Israel and Judaism. Some thought this was a genius move by Israel to end the war. Others say it was the greatest miscalculation in modern times because the Temple Mount is not under Israel's control. In Israel's parliament, the status quo has been to leave the question of sovereignty off the table. But attitudes are changing, and now in the Knesset, for the first time, politicians are openly talking about building the Jewish temple. As long as the Temple Mount is not in Jewish control, the third temple cannot be built. This has remained a pause on the prophetic clock. While the official policy of Israel is to leave the issue alone, the importance of the temple was reiterated when Israel's Prime Minister celebrated the opening of the American embassy in Jerusalem.
King David established our capital 3,000 years ago. In Jerusalem, King Solomon built our temple, which stood for many centuries. In Jerusalem, Jewish exiles from Babylon rebuilt the temple, which stood for many more centuries. In Jerusalem, the Maccabees rededicated that temple and restored Jewish sovereignty in this land. And it was here in Jerusalem, some 2,000 years later, that the soldiers of Israel spoke three immortal words: Ha Beit Biyadenu, the Temple Mount is in our hands. Words that lifted the spirit of the entire nation. We are in Jerusalem and we are here to stay.
In Israel's parliament, people are now openly talking about building the third temple. In times of war, the mind is focused on issues that are essential to life's greater purposes. Since 1948, Israel has fought 8 major wars for survival and 10 other conflicts. Each time, those fighting against Israel embrace the goal of destroying the state of Israel and driving the Jews into the sea. The most recent war has sharpened hearts and minds again. With the promise of land for peace shattered, hearts in Israel have changed, and even many liberal Israelis have concluded, if we get war whatever happens, why not just start building the temple for the Orthodox Jews? There's war after war after war. For this reason, the attitudes have changed in Israel. Why don't we just build the temple? Some of those fighting carry symbols of the Jewish temple and declare openly the temple must be rebuilt. There is overwhelming evidence that the Jewish temple stood on the Temple Mount 2,000 years ago. However, the exact location within the Temple Mount complex remains a topic of debate among archaeologists, Jewish leaders and scholars.
Solomon's temple may have stood behind me right here.
So the question is, did the Ark of the Covenant stand here on the solid rock at the Dome of the Spear, or did it stand over here behind me inside the Dome of the Rock? During Solomon's time, he filled the much smaller Temple Mount with lots of buildings. He had the temple, his palace, he had his Egyptian wife's palace, and then there was all the other important places around government. Now the Dome of the Rock, the belief is, for those who favour this section, that rock was actually used by Solomon as a sanctified area to sacrifice, because there were so many animals that he had to sacrifice. But the actual flat place, which was perfect for the Ark of the Covenant, was here. Many believe this was actually where Solomon put the Ark of the Covenant. This is the Holy of Holy area. But it may have been that Herod moved it over there, because Herod changed everything.
These different viewpoints highlight the complexity of archaeological inquiry in Jerusalem. Some theories propose the temple stood directly where the Dome of the Rock presently stands. Others suggest it was situated over the extensive underground cistern near the Al-Asqa Mosque. Due to this confusion, some Jews say it's possible for the Jewish temple to stand between the Dome of the Rock and Al-Asqa Mosque using a shared sovereignty arrangement. However, others say this would be impossible. In traditional Orthodox Judaism, Jews are forbidden to walk on the Temple Mount just in case they walk on the Holy of Holies without knowing it, because its location is uncertain. But other Jews declare that they know where the temple stood, and therefore it is safe to ascend the Temple Mount. In recent years, more than 50,000 Jews each year have visited the Temple Mount. However, there are strict rules governing their behaviour. They must stick to a clearly defined route, they must walk with security, and they cannot pray on the Temple Mount. Even if a child breaks this rule, will be arrested. When the Bible declares the third temple in Jerusalem will rise to fulfill all the ancient messianic prophecies, some declare where and how. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem believes God will intervene and change the hearts of Muslims worldwide. Their official belief is that Muslim leaders worldwide will acknowledge the importance of the Jewish temple and will voluntarily move the Dome of the Rock and Al-Asqa Mosque to another location. Others believe only a divine intervention will change the status quo. Throughout the story of Jerusalem, many great earthquakes have struck, destroying buildings.
So we're at the lowest section of the Ophel, the holy high place, and you can see behind me the evidence of a massive earthquake. The bedrock itself has been split. 1,000 years ago, there was an earthquake and the whole Dome of the Rock collapsed. And in my book, The End Times, the book of Revelation, I describe a similar thing happening during the end time, because for the third temple to be built, everything that stands there has to go unless they're going to sit side by side. So it took 8 years to research and write this book, The End Times, the book of Revelation. But this is where it's all going to happen. Imagine being here and Christ returns. Imagine seeing the third temple over there. So we're told in scripture there's going to be a massive earthquake in Jerusalem at the end times. And this is evidence here that massive earthquakes have been here before. They've split the bedrock. They've demolished the Dome of the Rock. It makes way for the third Jewish temple to be built. The earthquake comes, shatters the Dome of the Rock, and the Jews say, well, this is a sign from God. We're going to build the third temple. And the Temple Institute, they have everything ready. So only God can intervene to change the situation. The bedrock of Jerusalem will be split. And just over this way, we're told by the prophet that there's going to be such a gigantic earthquake and will split in two. and those who are fleeing from Antichrist will be able to run through.
So the question of where the third temple will stand on the Temple Mount is really crucial.